Hey everyone, welcome back to Midweek at the Compass. My name's Jake, one of the pastors here, and we have just wrapped up week 5 of our sermon series called Egypt, A Line in the Sand. You know, the theme that we've been resonating with this week is just what it looks like to be obedient. What does it look like to ultimately go where God is telling you to go? You know, week 1 of this sermon series, we talked a lot about the plan that God has and how he doesn't always give you all the steps of it. He says he'll be with you in the midst of this plan. He promises a lot of things, but what he doesn't promise is that he's going to give you every single step of the plan before he asks you to go. It's one of those things. What do you do in those moments? How do you obey what God is asking you to do? You know, I'm joined by a new friend today. Her name's AnnaMaria, and she's got a little bit of a similar story there as well. So AnnaMaria, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So if you wouldn't mind, could you at least just start out with telling us who you are and just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is AnnaMaria. I'm married. I have 2 boys, and I'm currently working at Safe Families for Children as an engagement strategist, and just loving where I'm at right now. It's a sweet season.
Awesome. So have you been at Safe Families for a long time, or is that a relatively new thing?
It is a very new thing. This last March, so I guess relatively new.
Okay.
That I've started working there, and I actually served with them as a volunteer 3.5 years prior.
Gotcha. So if it was a relatively new thing, then what was it that you were doing before Safe Families?
Yeah, so the last role that I had prior was a groups director, and in that role, I loved so many aspects of it. I was helping to oversee 7 campuses as it relates to groups, and really just love collaborating and hearing ideas from all the different groups pastors across the different campuses. And I also just loved really we were moving towards alignment and just talking about what that looks like and what does it look like for people to get into groups and that life transformation. I really care about just authenticity and life transformation and community. We need community. And so that was really exciting. Prior to that, I had done several other things in the church that were also related to gathering people in groups, and it's just always been a passion area of mine.
Yeah, so was ministry a first job or career for you? Was being a pastor, or was it something that was like a second career for you?
Well, to be honest, I had a lot of other jobs in the past, like little jobs just to kind of pay the bills. Ministry ended up being what I really wanted to turn into a career.
Okay.
Went to school for biblical studies and theology, and just loved just teaching God's word and pastoring, and also, I just loved the whole process of just aligning with God and helping others do the same.
Yeah, so you were talking about just multiple roles that you've had at the church that you were at previously. About how many of those roles was there?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a kinship with you then.
Yeah.
Didn't necessarily know that ahead of time. I feel like I've worn so many different hats here at the Compass Church. And it's a great thing. It keeps you on your toes. It keeps things fresh. God can move me around wherever he sees fit. But it's one where it went from like student ministries to college, and I volunteered on the worship team, and then came on staff at a certain point in time and did guest services. So how do you make people connect for the first time?
Yeah.
And then COVID hit, and I moved online, and now I'm also doing online and a campus pastor at a site in Plainfield. And it's just one of those, it's fun. It's really fun to see how God continues to work and shape things. So we have at least something in common there. I love it.
Yeah.
So did you love working at church? Was it something that you were it sounds like, you did the background for it. Was it something where you just felt like, this is where God has me? This is how I've been wired and designed?
Yeah, for that 8.5 years that I was there, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't jump out of bed fast enough on most days. Granted, there were some pretty hard, as anything in ministry, right? But
100%.
I mean, it was the good with, wheat with the chaff. But it was just beautiful. Like, I feel like I grew so much myself, pursuing and seeking what I felt like God was leading me into and calling me to in that season.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how you went from ministry into Safe Families. Can you start to wrestle through with us a little bit of what was happening in your life that made you think maybe this dream job wasn't where God was going to have me stay for a long period of time, and just how you were praying through that, processing it as you were going through it?
Yeah. So backtrack a little bit. While I was working at Willow, it was actually right before COVID. My family and I had just come out of a really hard season, and I feel like we were just in the season of being blessed. Like, we moved into this new home after just years of struggle. Just a lot of good things. My husband's business was taking off. I was in a job that I loved, all these things. And I was like, it almost felt good, because I was like, when's the shoe gonna drop? Because like, we had just come through just such a tumultuous season.
Yeah.
And so, but at one point I was like, I felt closer to God when I was in hardship. And I was like, why is that? And then I just started wrestling with it some more. And I felt like, even though I was working at a church, there was something more that God might be asking me to do, or something different, or not different at that time, but just something on a more personal level. And we'd known a friend that was working or serving with Safe Families for Children as a host. And what Safe Families is they actually help prevent kids from going into the foster care system and really help reunify families. And there's just a beautiful thing about it. And I was just like, I want to do this. And so me and my husband prayed about it and started hosting children while I was working at Willow. COVID hit. We actually were working from home, so I was actually able to host a little bit more and just watch how God wrecked my heart. And now it was no longer about like me focused, because I felt like it started to get me focused, because it was like, yay, I got this now and I got this. And I just wasn't, I mean, part of it was, there was a year of blessing that I felt like God was like, okay, just receive, right? But then it was like, okay, now I feel like I've been blessed to be a blessing. What do I need to do? So that in itself has changed my life forever and wrecked it for the better, and my husband and my kids, and they could tell you their own stories. And then as I was simultaneously working and doing all the things that I love with gatherings and groups and all those things, and then also at home, just being more one-on-one and more intimate with this family and this little girl that we had in our home, I just kept falling more in love with it. And then it was last year around this time, which is so interesting. We were in a small group with staff, and in that small group study, there was a week that talked about your giftings and your alignment and your story and all the things that are going together. And I had been just, all I could think about while we were going through this was, I wish I could host kids more. And my job was, at the time, groups director, I had a bit more responsibility than some of the other roles prior to that.
Sure.
And so it really, between that and my husband's job, it was really getting increasingly hard to actually host children. And so I was like just holding these two, like, God, what do you want me to do? Because I can't stop thinking about it, and I'm here. And then I started to get a little bit, to be honest, like depressed. And I was like, what's happening? And this has happened to me 2 other times in my life where I've gotten significantly like, don't want to get out of bed. And I'm like, okay, I know that usually this means that I need to change something, and I don't know what. I need to wake up to something I'm like not wanting to look at,
Yeah.
So I prayed, and I stepped back, and I started analyzing. And I always joke, and I mean this in the nicest way, but I got COVID over Christmas. And the first 3 days, I'm not making light of COVID. I know COVID is not something to make light of. But for me, it was a blessing.
Interesting.
Because in that season, I was like going. And that was when they had the 10-day quarantine. And I had to be in my room for 10 days. And the first 3 days, not great. And then I started to feel better. And selfishly, I was like, this feels a little nice, like not having to go and do all the things, like, sorry kids, can't make dinner, like.
As a workaholic myself, like, I can totally appreciate when you actually get a break. It's like, oh wow, this is really, it's kind of nice. You don't want to have the break for certain things, and yet mixed in with it, it's like, this is still okay. This is still okay.
Yeah, totally. And then I was like, whew, I think I needed this more than I thought, right?
Yeah.
And just sitting, it really gave me a lot of time to sit and reflect. So I I really think that was a pivotal moment for me, those days of just sitting in my room, some days kind of going nuts, but just really looking back at my story, remembering what God has done, seemed to be a theme then, and just trying to say, okay, where am I now? Why am I feeling all confused? Like, God, I know you're not the author of confusion. Where am I now? Like, why am I here? How did I get here?
Yeah.
And it started to make sense as I took a little break and as I started to realize, as the role was sort of shifting, where when I stepped into that role, it was like a lot of innovation and big picture, collaboration, all the things that are like in my wheelhouse. And then, as many who will know me know and can testify, operations is not my gifting. So it started to move a little bit more to like, I was getting tasked with more details, less innovation, and it needed to. I mean, I understand it. Different ministries need different things at different times and different seasons.
Absolutely.
And so this particular role, I could see where it was shifting, and I was told it was shifting, and they still said, we'd love for you to keep going, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna keep going because this is my dream job, like, I didn't say that out loud, but this is what I'm thinking, like, I worked really hard to get here, so and so I was just plowing through, and while I did learn how to make a mean spreadsheet.
Now you're totally speaking my language, by the way.
Well, that's not my language normally, so. But yeah, while I did learn how to do that, I did take some good tools away. It still was just, it started to become, God was clearly saying, like, I'm not, like, I started questioning it. Am I really supposed to be here? And that was sad. Like, I went through a whole internal grieving process where I didn't really know who to tell at the time other than, a couple close friends, because I was fighting it. I was wrestling. I was like, God, like, this is what I've wanted. Like, I was happy here. Like, I'm here and things are shifting, and, telling God what I wanted. And, when fear and things start to creep in, typically what I do is, in my flesh, I'll want to control it, right? Or like, we're just going to figure this out,
Yeah.
And I think I had probably been ignoring some warning signs that God was like gently whispering and gently saying, like, I'm showing you another way. I've got something else. And that was hard. In that, simultaneously, I had a friend who knew somebody who worked at Safe Families and was like, well, what else do you love doing? Because I was like, I feel like I'm being called away, but I don't know what I'm being called to, and maybe I'm not. And I just kept going back and forth, and I was like, well, I love Safe Families. I would host kids all day long, but you pay money for that. You don't get money for that. And we have to pay the bills. And there's reality. So my husband was like, I think we were like doing the math and everything. He's like, if you can find something with insurance, that's the biggest thing, because he's a business owner. I'm like, okay. So I was like, I was even at the point where I was like, maybe I just need to step back and take a break, take care of my heart, go to Starbucks or something.
Sure.
And then this connection happened with Safe Families. And it was a scary move in a sense, because it was, for me, I'm a 6 on the Enneagram, so I care about security. And so it was it was a big pay cut. So that, and then I was like, are you sure? But they had the benefits. So I was like, okay, it checked our requirement, but I could actually see myself here, and I love it here, and I don't know, and God, well, maybe not. And I was just going back and forth and fighting him some more. And then, like, over a series of events, it just became more and more clear. And God was just asking me do you trust me? Like, I just felt like I kept seeing different signs and different things, like, do you trust me? And, it's in the slowing, I feel like, is when you can really step back and start to, like, hear that whisper and remember, and, like, just even having those 10 days in my room, remembering where God has brought me from and where he had brought me to. I'm like, he got me out of so many crazy things.
Yeah.
And here we are experiencing all these blessings. Like, how could I not trust him? And so
Well, and in
here
some
I
ways,
am.
that's the Elijah story too, right? Like
Yeah.
God waits and he doesn't speak through the chaos or the noise or the grand things a lot of times. He waits for the quiet finally to whisper. And it's just like, do you actually trust that I am who I say I am? I've proven that over and over again. Like, yes, please do that. But I'm in the same boat, right? Like it feels like it takes something grand for me to slow down sometimes, which shame on me. Like that's not a bragging statement whatsoever. Yeah. It's more of the, oh, man, like how am I intentionally taking the time to slow down so I'm hearing God so that I can obey in the small things and the big things, right? So I'm wondering if I could just toss it back your way then. How did you feel you got like the final confirmation and the okay of God saying, this is your time to move on from your dream job
Yeah.
to what I have next for you?
I don't think there was any big revelation. I think it was a lot of small revelations that became increasingly clear, and I needed to take the step in obedience and trust God on the other side of it.
So how have you seen God at work since you've made the move? Because I can't imagine maybe let's even backtrack at one thing. Can you tell us just a little bit more about Safe Families so then we can kind of go into how you've seen God work through it?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, Safe Families is really a family reunification program. We're all about families. A lot of the families that come through and benefit from Safe Families are really just people that might not have family support. A lot of the time, there's lack of resources or lack of family support, and they're in a bind, and they need help. And I'm sure you have kids, right? I have kids, and I know that there are times when my kids get sick or I get sick or, whatever. I have my husband or I have somebody else that I can rely on to help me. And a lot of these families don't. It's a single parent. Every story is so different. But you'll see too with the foster care system and everything, as everyone knows, it is inundated right now, but there's a lot of needs that don't necessarily need to go into the foster care system. I just heard, I can't remember the statistic, but it's a large percentage is neglect that go in versus abuse.
Okay.
And the neglect typically comes from moms who it's not that they don't love their children, because they do, and I see it all the time. It's because they can't do it all. And we're not created to do it all. Like, we're created for community, And so just seeing there's a lot of shame, they didn't have that modeling and support maybe. Every story is so different.
Yeah.
But I was just like, wow, what a way to just literally love your neighbor and just open your home and be like, they just need someone to sit with, or they need their kids to be watched for a short period of time. And with that, we found that we have a 93% reunification rate with kids and their parents.
Really?
Yes. And so we really there's a family coach that works with our moms. Well, I say moms, it's parents, we don't discriminate, but a lot of them are moms. That we work with our moms to help with resources. So say it's homelessness. We see a lot of homelessness. We see a lot of, we've had moms living in their car, riding the train with their kids, and they need somewhere for their kids. And so we might be able to find shelters or different things in the area to kind of help the mom get on their feet while the child is getting love and support and stuff that they need in another home. We're all volunteer-based and staff-supported.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So let's go now to the second half of the question. It's just like, how have you seen God at work through the midst of your experiences with Safe Family, whether that would be from opening up your home to, the official role capacity? Is there a story or two or something in particular that come to mind for you?
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so many. Let me think. I really do think it's the first placement we had, And we got a text saying there were 5 kids that were needed to be picked up at the DCFS office, or they would go into the foster care system. And we were only able to take one, and it was our first hosting. So we ended up taking the oldest and found a community of other hosts that took the others, and we all stayed close together. And I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I went through all the training, I did all the things, but then I was like, oh my goodness, look, this is happening. Kind of like when you bring a kid home for the first time, you're like, they're gonna trust me, you know? So I just went through this whole thing, and and we're like preparing. We didn't know what to prepare for like, just like sadness or trauma or like all this. Like, she walked in, she was like, hello, like I'm here. And this bundle of joy, and she just taught our family so much in that whole season about joy in the hardest of circumstances. Because this little 3-year-old girl saw things that a 3-year-old girl should have never seen. And it wasn't because of anything other than really just their family had lack of support, and it was in an area that wasn't maybe the safest, and lack of resources. They just needed a family friend, you know? And so that is one of our roles as family friend, is ongoing support, kind of like an aunt and uncle. So that they have become that. And that was my very first hosting, and that I'm very close with that family now. So that has wrecked me, and just watching my kids too, like, they're 2 boys. It was so funny. It was awesome having a little girl in the house, because she was like, look at your beautiful flowers. They're like, what?
We have flowers in our house?
Yeah. They're like, who would say that? I'm like, she would. And I'm like, we're going to be friends quick. So it was really great. But just even watching them soften and learn and diving into someone else's story and culture and learning the differences is so important, and we learn so much from it. Like, there's a heart piece that happens in us each and every time. So
yeah. So is there an ideal family person to get involved in something like Safe Families, or is that something where if you're feeling God's leading that it's worth checking out?
Mm-hmm. I think it's a both and, because like, I do think anybody can do it if you're feeling called to do it, for sure. I mean, the training is available. God will carry you through. He really will. I also think that the timing, you know, like understanding, like, is this the right timing? Is your mindset in the right place, right? Because it is hard, you know, like you don't know fully this is an ambiguous thing. Like, it could turn one way or another way, and it also, it's stretching, but in one aspect, I'm like, everybody should do it. And I do think that there's a part, I'll take it back. There's a part everybody can play.
Okay.
Hosting might not be for everybody, but there is a part everybody can play. There's family friends, there are resource friends, they're like bringing a meal. It's really what we do in our own communities at church, you know, to love our neighbors when they're going through a hard time. And, you know, or just being present, going out to coffee with the mom, or or hanging with the kids at the park so mom can take a nap because she needs it, or something, so she can recharge.
All the moms are saying amen as they're listening to this right now. Yes.
Oh my gosh, that just reminded me one story of a mom that she just called me one time, and she was like, AnnaMaria, don't judge me, but I'm hiding under my bed. And I was like, why? What's going on? Like, I'm thinking like she lived in a rough area, like something's happening, like I'm like, are you okay? Are you okay? And she's like, no, my kids, they're screaming and I can't handle it and I'm hiding under my bed. And I'm like, I'll be hiding under my bed too. So you are totally, like, it's just that normalizing, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you're okay, you're not bad. Like, she just needed to hear it in that moment. Like, you are normal.
This is okay. We've been there. Yes.
So,
man. So just one last thing, like, how could people get more information about Safe Families? What would be a good place for them to go?
Yeah, so they can go to the website. It's safe-families.org. They can call us. I can definitely give you that information if you want to put it in the notes section. We have an intake line.
Great.
And they can also email me if they'd like at Mattey@safefamilies.net.
Awesome. Just open-ended. Is there any other thing that we didn't quite get to that you would love to just chime in with? And the answer could very easily be no, and that's okay too. But I just want to make sure to give you an open floor if there's any last things that you kind of want to say, whether it's about obedience, whether it's about safe families, or anything in between.
Yeah, I guess for those that are listening, maybe for you, you're feeling you're in a season where you just don't know where to turn next, or you're in a wrestling. I would say lean in. Don't run from it. It will, God has something better on that other side when you trust him. And I think that's hard when we can't see what's ahead of us, right? But I would say start with remembering what he's already done. To fill back up your faith bucket. Because sometimes we forget, many times we forget, just like the people in the Bible constantly forgot, right? We need those reminders of who God is and his faithfulness. And God will carry you through. I have the image of, you may have seen this picture of the Jesus asking for a small teddy bear from a little girl, and behind him he's got this ginormous teddy bear, and she's like, Jesus, but I don't want to. Like, she doesn't want to surrender it. She doesn't want to give it up.
Yeah.
And he's like, I've got greater plans for you. And there's this huge teddy bear, like a bit better, bigger and better, like that Ephesians 3:20, measurably more than you can ever ask or imagine behind it. And it's that surrendering and then trusting that God has good for you.
Well, I just want to take another moment to say thank you, right? You made the hard decision to leave comfort and what you loved and what you knew. And because of it, families are made whole. And I know you wouldn't necessarily take all of the credit for it, but you are truly being the hands and feet of Jesus to people who need the hands and feet of Jesus. And man, just hearing a 93%, right? Like you are playing a part in how you're hosting people, you're playing a part in the organization that you're working with now. You are truly letting people see the good news of Jesus in ways that they might not experience otherwise. So thank you. I know it's not an easy road, and I know it's not an easy thing, and you probably don't hear thank you enough, but from my seat, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you very much. I couldn't do it without our volunteers, honest to God. I mean, it's been a blessing, but it's the constant obedience of people taking that step to serve that's what keeps us going and makes a tiny dent in this big problem that we have with foster care system and orphans and widows and all the things.
Yeah. Awesome. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Love getting to have these further faith conversations based on what our weekend messages are about. I hope that you're interested in knowing more about what you can do, whether it's related to safe families or not. What is it that God's asking you to obey him in? What's the thing that he's been poking at or you've been wrestling with, whether it's for just a moment or for years and years at a time? Continue to have those honest conversations with God. Open it up to others that you know and trust. Here's a staff at the Compass Church. We're honored to have those conversations with you as well. I would be honored to have those conversations with you, just to hear about what it is that God's gifting you for, what he's causing you to see and notice. And then maybe we can have conversations about what it is that God might want you to do about it. I'm honored to be able to do that with you. So thank you for at least considering it. Thank you for joining in and being here today, and looking forward to wrapping up our series next week, where we're going to be joined by Jeff Griffin as a wrap up about all things of our Egypt series, how it came about, what are some of the fun stories we heard mixed in with all of it, and then where we're going coming up, because guess what? It's the Christmas season. So get ready for it, because we're going to jump in and join the fun here at Midweek at the Compass.